Welcome to the Entrepreneur Cross Immersive session. I saw it on some cool advert and they look really cool. But is it like meets? I'm not sure. Entrepreneurship meets Immersive, and this is what this is about. And this session came about because I'm one of the founders of the IEN, but in my day job, I run a company called Entourage that does quite a lot of development work with people who are developing new immersive work and that sort of side of things. And we often talk about the road to making an immersive experience or making a creative business is basically like the immersive triangle. You need to have the sort of creative, IP, the team, you need to have a venue, and you need to have the money. And lining those three things up at the same time is so hard, because often people will have like one or two of those things, but then, you know, by the time they've found the money, the venue's gone, or if at the time they've sort of landed the IPs and their creative team's gone. But it's timing. If you can get those three things lined up at the same time, then great. You've got a show, you've got a project. So we thought we'd bring together a bunch of people for whom they support people who are doing the commercial development of their experiences and trying to get them off the ground, alongside Tom Lionetti, who is obviously someone who has done this and is continuing to develop and open up new work and new experiences, and is very much sort of like someone who we can talk to about his experience of his journey and his tips and stuff for the future. So why don't we start with just going along the line. Did you want to introduce yourselves, talk a little bit about who you are, what you do, your sort of entrepreneur's journey, and maybe sort of one key thing that you've learned so far along that journey that you'd like to impart to us.
Cool. Hello? Cool, it works. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Sarfo Kantanka. I am one half of NEXUS, so I'm a co-founder with my partner in crime at the end, Farouk Deen. So I'll probably talk for half the allotted time, because I'll always end up over-talking about NEXUS, so when it gets to Farouk, everyone knows about NEXUS already. So, yeah, NEXUS was born out of our relationships and working with the creative community on our first company, which still survives today, which is called Cellar Door. Cellar Door is a creative events company. We both went full-time on that gig in 2012. Within that, we have our own IP, an event activation called Bollywood Fever. In doing events with brands, with corporates, and helping them translate what they wanted to do to our target audiences, and in working with creators, we understood the difficulties creators had in commercializing what they did. So taking it beyond just seeing the output as being creativity to how do you make your proposition viable as a business entity. And it's from that NEXUS was born. So NEXUS incubates creative, digital, and tech companies, and we help them to scale and grow. And that includes finding money. So I think one thing Andy said at the end, which was one takeaway point that I guess I'd leave the audience with as a starting anecdote is money is key. It doesn't make the world go round, but it has to be in our thinking. We don't need to be the expert necessarily at managing the funds or finding the funds, but it has to be part of how do we make the proposition viable, which includes looking at your commercial model. And I'll stop there. Thank you.
Cool. Hey everyone, my name is Mairi Nolan. I'm a little bit different, so I'm a senior game designer freelance at the moment, and I actually come more from the escape room side of things. So I currently work in a lot of board games, a lot of tabletop, immersive experiences, kind of adjacent, video games as well. But I kind of got my career started over the last sort of 8 to 10 years doing physical escape rooms. Right now, I'm working in a lot of like Kickstarter and crowdfunding. So basically how you take your idea, how you validate your idea, and then how you actually get it funded, whether that's directly through an investor or a publisher, or actually in the general audience kind of things. That's absolutely massive in sort of tabletop and board game as well. Type of clients I worked with like Wizards of the Coast, I've worked with Magic the Gathering, I've worked in Dungeons and Dragons. I do a lot of short-term sort of marketing activations, which are games in themselves, so Netflix, Amazon Prime, Universal Studios. And at the moment, a lot of my projects are video games, actually, as I was telling these guys before we started. Oops, sorry. And yeah, and to bring it back to that question that you asked us to think about before this, which was, what's the one thing to take away? For me, it's always community and communication, basically. Because whatever you're making, if you're asking for money, you're asking for trust, and building up trust is absolutely key to any sort of size scale business, whether you're building a board game, an immersive experience, whether you're pitching to an investor, a publisher, whether you're asking 10,000 people on Kickstarter to back your project. It's all about, I always recommend to my clients, and I always do this when I run my own Kickstarters, is having that community in place and really putting in the time to build up trust, whether that's previous projects or whether that's just sort of how you communicate about the active one. So yeah, I think that's my kind of key takeaway from that, and that's me. Nice to meet everyone. Thanks for coming.
Hi, my name's Tom Lionetti-Maguire. I'm the CEO of Little Lion Entertainment, employing over 300 people in this industry now. Our business is getting on for 10 years old now, I think. And the business is split into two sort of segments, or two phases now. So we have our immersive attractions, immersive theatre productions on one side, and on the other side we have a new-ish, 2 or 3 years old now, live video games arm to the business, which is particularly exciting and where I actually see a lot of the immersive entertainment industry going. But our roots were very much in immersive and immersive theatre. And in terms of fundraising, the specific topic for today, we are interesting in that our genesis was through crowdfunding. So we started with seed funding through crowdfunding, then moved through to private equity, and now, after 3 Series A stages, are at sort of VC stage and moving to Series B, which is an interesting journey. And to sort of pick up on what you talked about, Andy, I totally agree that the analogy that I use is it's an alignment of the stars. And actually, I would say that there are 4. There's money, there's a location, there's the concept, and then there's a team. And sometimes it does feel like you're chasing a lunar eclipse to get that alignment of the stars. And it can be very, very difficult. And it can feel like, juggling and spinning plates at the same time in order to get them all together in sync. But when it works, it really does work. Yeah.
Thanks, Tom. Hi, everybody. My name is Farouk Deen. As my business partner, Mark, has already mentioned, I'm a co-founder of NEXUS and Cellar Door. Some more background as to why we're even on stage talking to you about money and funding and business. Both Mark and I are ex-bankers. Please don't hold that against us in any way. But I was fortunate in my career to be both a corporate banker and an investment banker. I first started off specializing in retail and wholesale corporate business, large business, where the minimum turnover is £250 million plus. And I specialised in clothing and footwear, so high street brands like Zara, Aquascutum, Jimmy Choo, Versace, brands you're familiar with. And then later on in my career, I went into investment banking, where I specialised in asset securitization and trading them balance sheets across the globe with various investment banks. At the same time, I started my first company with Mark, Cellar Door, which is the creative events agency. And from that, it evolved NEXUS. A little bit more as to the context as NEXUS and why we had that solution for a problem that we saw in the market. Where we were doing creative activities and events and other activations for brands, we realized that we had our peers come to us to ask us business questions like, What's a letter of credit? Do we know an accountant? What's the best way of receiving an overdraft? Questions that people felt some form of shame or felt like they didn't know the routes to have or ask or feel comfortable to ask those types of questions. And it was from that gap, that problem, that we felt we needed to create a HQ for creatives whereby they could feel comfortable to have the business questions and access to the business infrastructure that they needed to do their job. And what we have found and observed is creatively everyone's very good at what they do in their skill set. However, there's universal good practice in terms of business that apply to any industry that they may not necessarily have had the experience or even the opportunity to have the exposure of information to, like how do you raise funding or even position yourself to be comfortable to talk about money. Some people don't even know how to ask for the right amount of money that they are due for the skill or the experience that they do. So coming from a banking background where speaking large numbers is another Tuesday for us, is getting people used to actually, one, how do you value yourself, your business, your time, and how should you feel comfortable to communicate that to your target clients and even to identify that as well. And just to finish off the last point as to current takeaways for me, I suppose mine's more less business but more of a positioning that actually in reality do not take it so seriously. Collectively what we're doing is in the world of entertainment, and as though our livelihoods are in some way determined to it, don't be deterred. There's a balance to life. Yes, you might be chasing money. Yes, the VC might reject you, but just remember to sleep well, drink water, get sunlight, hug the people that you love. Don't take it so seriously, otherwise it will stop the bigger picture of living your life.
Amazing. Cool. So a little bit about the format today. So if any of you have been to one of our huddle events, which we hold periodically throughout the year, little networking events, we have this bit at the end we call the Any Questions bit, where people can text in on a WhatsApp number any question they want to, so they don't have to stand up and if they don't want to. Text it in the number, and then we'll try and answer. We'll offer an opinion potentially if we can offer an opinion, but we'll also often ask the room and say, anyone else in this room have an opportunity for this? And you can absolutely put your hand up and sort of share your experience of that particular problem or what your solution was. We're meant to be sort of trying to build a community here which is supportive of each other and open to help each other. So we've had various things in the past where, people have put their hand up and say, I can help you with that, let's talk afterwards. And those are kind of the connections that we're trying to create. Cool. So, someone has been on it, and at 1:20, no less, because they read the program and found the WhatsApp number in there, came through and asked, how do you access owners of IP, i.e. films, Disney, to create experience based around their IP? And I think I'm going to expand that a little bit to not only sort of how, but should you? And what are the pros and cons around doing IP-based pieces of work? Anyone from the panel want to start with that, and then we'll throw it out to the room?
Yeah, I can jump in. We've done a few. That's a really good question. In the short amount of time that we've been doing this, we've seen quite a lot of change. There's been quite a lot of new entrants to this banner of what is called Immersive, and I think there was a thinking that you could just take any IP and slap an experience on it and it will pay dividends. And on the really lower end of the scale, you get Willy Wonka in Glasgow, right? Or what was it, Bridgerton in New Orleans. So it's not just a fix-all. It's not just stick something on the side of the tin and it will be okay. You have to get everything else right. You've got to get in that, coming back to that analogy of the stars, right? You've got to get the team right first. You've got to get the concept right first. You've got to get some money together. So none of that can be substituted. And I guess my volition for going into any project is that you have to care about it. You have to care about the customer. You've got to care about what they're experiencing from the second they walk in the door. And if you don't, and if it's just a money grab, and if it's just about putting on a branded partnership with a big brand, then that might work. But I don't think this is the industry for you. And I think you might be going into it for the wrong reasons, but that's just my personal opinion. Having said that, if your concept is conducive and if it's additive to have a big IP or an IP that you love, or like writing a script with an actor in mind, if you had the IP in mind when you came up with the concept, and if it's a match made in heaven, then you should do it. Then you are looking at it for the right reasons. And at that point, I would venture that you've made a wise decision. The next thing to know is that you then get into a whole new world of problems, which is dealing with big IP. And we've got a relationship with a big European conglomerate. We've dealt with Hollywood studios. We've dealt with giant Japanese video game companies, and they are big corporates. And at the end of the day, they don't really care about you. So the first thing that you're going to get into, which is difficult, is, well, you're going to need to get them on the phone if you can. Good luck. But keep hustling. That's the only way to do it. Then you're going to have to drag yourself through negotiations with them on the contract, and they're going to try and take as much off you as they can, and they're going to put in as onerous terms as they possibly can, and they're going to try and put in a huge royalty rate, and they're going to put all the financial liability on you to begin with, or they're certainly going to try to, and it will all be under this credo that we're I almost said a name there. We're Hollywood X studio. This is just how it is, mate. Like, deal with it. That's not always the case, but that's your sort of next sort of pitfalls or area of pitfalls. And then you'll find that there's approvals, and because you're suddenly stepping into their world, they will then try and impinge upon your vision and your product. And they might be, if things start to go sour, they might actually change your vision and change your reason for going into it. And if that sounds like that whole sort of tributary that I've taken you on is a somewhat negative one, I promise you it isn't. It's just I would rather that this feels like a forum that is about reality and honesty, and that is the reality and honesty of it. But if you go into it for the right reasons, and if you find a good partner, and some of the big corporates are really great partners, then what you can get at the end is magic.
I think it's it. I think so. I've worked on a lot of IP-led projects through our work with people like Sig Cinema and those sort of guys, and it was always fascinating to see the brand recognition you got from a well-known piece of IP, and the amount of people who had come to your experience just because they liked the IP. There's a massive portion of the audience every time, never been to an Immersive show before, never been to a Sig Cinema show before, but they love James Bond, or they love Moulin Rouge, and they're buying a ticket because it's great fun. So, but at the same time, you also saw the other side of that where, like you said, the levels of approvals to go through, and like the guys from IEN who own James Bond actually embedded someone in the creative team to police how the IP was being used on a daily basis. They were lovely and they were great and they were really helpful, but it was a different vibe to, being able to do it yourself. In terms of sort of how you approach it, again, something that we've worked with. Often it's understanding what sort of thing you want to try and curate and how you want to try and therefore which department you want to try and go to. I've found that you can go to the marketing department of a lot of these places to do a marketing activation style pop-up thing, and they're into that, especially if there's like a new series or something coming up, that sort of jazz. If you want to make like a long-running attraction based on something, then you need to go and find who the live experience or the experiential licensing person is, and it's a licensing deal. And I mean, it's a hitting LinkedIn, like, you know, searching through, trying to find out who's got the person with the job title that looks like a lead, and then just reaching out and seeing if you can get into it. And then, in my experience, the first thing I want to know is who you are, will you be able to do it well, and how much money will you make them? And if you can sort of focus your pitch deck around those things to when you explain the idea to them, that's the thing that will sort of either get you applying thing. How do you guys, Bollywood, I mean, what a world that is, and what a world for ripe for immersive experiences. This was my top tip for you guys. Bollywood, amazing. How do you get into that?
How do we get into it? So it's a bit like what Farouk said earlier. We saw a problem, and we're just a bit stubborn in terms of just taking on too much, and we're getting better at that in terms of not just going for everything. There's so many problems, and we just want to solve all of them. And in actuality, it was 2013. We were doing rooftop cinemas in Ealing, West London, and we just done the summer activation. Went really well. The council loved it, and they said, actually, we've got a rooftop in Southall. We'd love for you to do a Bollywood-style rooftop there. And the last thing we wanted to do was to work with that council again on anything. But actually, we recognised that there was an audience that weren't being spoken to. And we thought, why is it when we saw Bollywood films advertised, it was late at night in a random cinema in the outskirts of London, when it's one of the most vibrant, money-making film economies in the world? We just didn't think it had the respect that it deserved. So we decided to say, how can we bring to life the world of Bollywood in an authentic way, but put it front and center, and also to bring it to mainstream audiences, again, whilst maintaining authenticity. I'm from Ghana originally, Farouk, Nigeria, Sierra Leone. So in my culture, we grew up watching Bollywood films. There would be no Nigerian Nollywood without Bollywood. Just by doing a bit more research, we discovered it was huge in Eastern Europe, in Turkey. So you've got this film genre, which is watched globally. China as well. The Chinese love Amir Khan. Absolutely love him. Love him. But so we've got this film genre which is so well followed, but no one was tapping into it. Not to commercialize it, but just to celebrate it. So that's how we got into it. And in 2015, we put our money together, and it wasn't a lot of money, quite a few credit cards actually. And we hired out Barge House on the South Bank over a bank holiday weekend, which meant we had the Friday and the Monday as well. And we screened 25 titles. And it was a melting pot of food, of music, dance, art. We collaborated with a couple of universities to take people through the history of Bollywood, and that was that was our first foray into the world of Bollywood. And we repeated it year after year, and the biggest one we did was probably in 2018, where we got the rights to the Star Wars equivalent of Bollywood. It's a fantastic film called Sholay, made in 1975. That took us about a year to secure. There was no company we were speaking to. It was literally ringing number to number and been passed from relative to relative within a family. So we screened that. We got some BFI funding off the back of it. We hired out the ICC in Birmingham, did it over across a weekend. We lost a lot of money, and that's what creatives do. We just saw the end vision. It was never going to make money because the ticket price and this, that, the other, but we wanted to do it. So more credit cards were used, and it's been one of probably the second best event we've ever done. I think the first best event you'll probably say is, I think we did Charlie Chaplin's The Gold Rush as a rooftop experience, which was amazing. But yeah, I'll pass the mic over. But one thing I will say about IP is don't just think about the IP you're getting, look at your IP. So we've protected Bollywood Fever as a brand identity. So protect what you are doing first and foremost. Don't get caught up in their IP, because as Tom's alluded to, the further you go into it, it stops being that first date. It stops being a honeymoon period, and it's really business, and it takes the fun out of it a little bit. But if you're doing it and you're building an asset yourself, then there's something potentially for you to sell or pass down or collaborate with. So yeah, my comment is protect your own IP first and foremost.
Maya, have you had any experience in like escape room gaming world of incorporating IP into the sort of projects that you're supporting?
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked on a lot of IP games, actually. As all you guys are talking about, I realized most of my games are IP. But I think I've been very fortunate in that a lot of them did reach out to us first. So I do freelance, but I work for like bigger companies that like have their own kind of escape games, things they do. And a lot of IPs would come to us and be like, oh, we've played this game you've done. We've played this kind of escape room or whatever it was. And we want the same, but our IP kind of thing. That is an amazing gig. Like, if you get that, absolutely go for it, assuming, as you say, it does actually match with what you're doing as a company. But the flip side to that is, yeah, kind of echoing what everyone else said. It's like relentless pitching. Once you have an idea and you really want to get an IP behind it, it is like hammering every single person you can find in connection. So again, I'm like trying to be slightly careful about which clients I talk about, but I can say that we've been, with one of the video game clients I do work for, we've been trying to get the Zelda IP for like 3 years. And I think I've sat in about 16 meetings, and every time I'm like, we're so close, like they love this game. And it's just so difficult, like anytime you go for something really big. At this point, we basically have the game designed. We just want them to say yes, so if they're watching. But no, it's interesting. And I would just like to mention one other thing. So I'm not sure exactly how many people in the audience are sort of solo freelancers as well, but I do have an extra piece of experience to weigh in on that I've found that working with IPs as a solo individual, as a freelancer, like you do end up building up a team, but I have found negotiating the rights to use that game in your own personal portfolio quite difficult as a solo person. So that is one thing to bear in mind, is like a game or like an experience can be like really amazing, really like flashy, great in your portfolio, and like amazing for getting more clients as an individual. But if they are tricky with their contracts, which massive IPs are very, very tricky, massive legal teams, that can be a big kind of sacrifice to make it that like, oh, well, you can't talk about this, or you can only say you did this, or you can only sort of put this in your portfolio. That's just my personal experience, not every IP, but definitely something to bear in mind if anyone is a solo entrepreneur, as I am. But yeah.
Amazing. Is there anyone in the room who would like to impart some knowledge or experience around licensing IP, getting IP, working with IP?
So I've been that really annoying person who's embedded on behalf of the company.
It can be a great experience, can't it?
So yeah, I've been a brand guardian for a very large IP company. What I would say is also think about your local markets. So where are you taking this? So for example, I was assigned to a project in China, and to try and make the IP I was working for work in that market was really tough. I work for a factual IP company, and they were trying to shift it into being more, dramatic and scripted, and it just wasn't working. So, yeah, something to think about.
Amazing. Anyone else? Or should we move on?
Yep.
One more at the back? Oh, of course, Mr. Bennett.
Thanks. Hi, my name is Matthew. I worked at Secret Cinema for quite a while, and my advice would be with IP, just sometimes you just got to know when to walk away, because when we did Guardians of the Galaxy, which took us about 2 years to even get to the point of talking about the story, even though we did about 10 decks, when the Marvel team actually turned up, they were like, no, you can't do this story. We want you to write a new story that doesn't actually exist. And they kind of pitched it as new canon. And they were like, wouldn't it be great? You're going to work with Marvel. You can write your own story. And I was like, no. The whole point of Secret Cinema is people know the story, and it allows people to come and play really freely because they've got that structure. And they bullied us into it. And I regret that at that point we didn't back out, because we ended up making a pretty good show, but it sold the whole Secret Cinema experience short, and I think sold the Marvel story a bit short. And yeah, you just end up making something a bit half-baked and stranded in the middle. So when you finally get onto the shores of the dream island, it isn't always the place maybe you want to be.
Amazing. Cool. So this one here, are there any mentorship programs or partnerships that can help guide Black creatives in securing funding for their projects? And how can Black creatives leverage their unique narratives and perspectives for making a compelling case for funding? Tom? That's
Sorry, there's two parts to that question.
Two parts, yeah. Do you know of any mentorship programs or partnerships that can help guide Black creatives in securing funding for their projects?
Yes, we run one at Nexus, not specifically for Black people, but for creatives. We have an 8-week accelerator that will take you from ideation through to investor pitch deck. And at the end of that 8-week course, you will be in front of angel and VC investors that generally do invest in pre-seed companies. So that's another thing, that's a theme that's come up where we've been talking about IP and having the IP owners interject themselves into your creative vision. Equally, be very careful who you take your money from, because invariably you have VCs that can sit on your board or insist to sit on your board, or whoever it is that's giving you money, and they may want to change your original vision as well. So be very equally as cautious as to who you're getting into bed with from the financial side as well. Make sure that you're aligned in the end objective. One of the things Mark and I have been taught over the years from our own business coach is that if you are aligned on the end objective, you can still have very difficult conversations within that, because you're both fighting for the same thing. But if you're not aligned, especially with the finance of it, and you can attest to this with managing shareholders and their expectations, their egos, their visions, that will be equally as much as a headache as actually just dealing with the IP holder, or even just doing the event itself and trying to sell tickets. So again, choosing who your team is also includes your finance team, and where the money's coming from, and what their real stated objectives is. If they've got integrity aligned with their actions and they are being aligned with you as a partner, it will make your life so much easier. So yeah, Nexus Creative HQ, we run those accelerators for creatives. There are other platforms outside of creativity that are specifically designed for Black people in business, but in terms of creativity, that's one that I will put out there. What's the second part of that question?
Well, the second part is, how can Black creatives leverage their unique narratives and perspectives to make a compelling case for funding? But I think there's an argument to say that actually, it's obviously not just Black creatives, but any creatives who have got a particular unique point of view, be that sort of disability or gender or racial, so I'm using the wrong words, but where are the opportunities to create work, particularly around those lived experiences and those perspectives?
That's a difficult one, because there's the lens of being Black, brown, female. Money doesn't care about that. It doesn't. What's the return? So when I'm looking at your business idea or your IP, I'm looking at the idea, the concept, and then the character of the people or the team. Are they able to actually realize that vision that they've put down? However, I do recognize that myself, Mark, and our team that approaches that way. So one of the other things that I would give advice from is also expand your own personal network. Turn up to places like this, because to be quite frank, if I did count the number of Black and brown people in the room in the summit, I know there should be more. And this is where you meet people over tea, over coffee. Also turn up where you socialize. It is literally that. It's the old boy network. It's golf. Like, turn up to places where you know high net worth individuals or the people that have funding. You can socialize with them, because half the time it's not necessarily the idea that they're investing in. It's you. Oh, I like you. And you might not be successful. So this is going back to some of the other things. You might have the triage that Andy and Tom and everyone else have talked about here aligned. You might have an amazing team. You might be an amazing founder. And you could still fail. That's the reality of business. In the lead up to COVID back in 2020, I'm sure we can still remember that. There was a 2-week period, Andy knows this story because we were laughing and crying at the same time over it, where Mark and I over 2 weeks saw our pipeline turnover of about 600,000 at the time evaporate. Like, what's this? What's going on here? Why is everyone pulling out for what's going on? To no fault of ours, external circumstances happened to be that as an events agency, literally what we were doing, gathering people into a room, was becoming illegal. We weren't allowed to do what we were going to do. So that's what I mean by taking perspective in the wider picture of your life. There's things outside of your own control, even though you have got everything aligned perfectly, that could still mean it fails. One of the things, I'm going to mention a name now, that I got surprised about in terms of a failure, although some might not see it as well, is the BBC Earth exhibition. Massive. Did anyone go to that, by the way? Yeah. Exactly, just here. Absolutely phenomenal experience. If you've got kids, would recommend any parent to take their kids there. Entertaining, educational. They spent the money, they marketed, they had BBC, they had David Attenborough, they had BBC Earth. Failed. Now, I'm sure there's been some insights as to why we think that failed here, but that was all aligned in terms of even the advice that we're giving. But yeah, as a takeaway, in terms of fundraising and if you are anyone of color, women, or anything of that, is remove that as the thought pattern and immerse yourself in spaces where you need to be regardless. Just turn up and socialize in that area and ingratiate yourself into the people that you need to be speaking to. That's how literally we met the people we have invested into. One of them we met at the very first summit here.
I agree with Farouk. And it's not a but, there is no but. But as Farouk said, as long as you're aligned on the vision, then you can have conversations. Farouk's given I'll term it the economic answer. We both study economics. Economics will tell you 1 + 1 = 2. Then you've got politics, which is what really happens. So what Farouk has just described is we have to just turn up and be the best version of ourselves. We then do that, and then you get societal issues of being punched down on, which is the reality of why that person might have messaged in, because as a black founder, that is their experience. That experience in this world of creativity, and I can say it because we're in it. It's ego-driven. It's a closed network. It's who you know. It's name dropping, Secret Cinema, Punch Drunk, which are all great brands. But if everyone works with them, then actually we don't really need to be engaging with you because your CV doesn't look that great. If you're not turning up to the rooms, it might be because you're not let into those rooms. So I do think that there is a requirement for us in the room, when we are in those rooms, when we're hearing those sorts of narratives where people are being punched down on, to also turn up and shut those voices down. Because I've been in rooms where those voices aren't shut down, which is why things become policy and people, let's say, all look a certain way on certain productions. Or, look, from Farouk's and my perspective, when we had the George Floyd incident, I say incident, when he was murdered, we had ITV call us, who wants to do an interview about about business, just by coincidence. We had Time Out, who featured us on there. They wanted us to come onto their Instagram to do a live. We had a coffee shop at the time. Like I said, we just jumped between too many things. We had a coffee shop, and they wanted us to do that. We became popular because supporting black businesses became popular.
And we did receive racism online when we were live.
Yeah, and on that we did receive racism. There's also, every year during Black History Month, where I tend to keep my head down, because that's where brands will get in touch with us and say, oh, would you like some free mentorship, or would you come and talk to our blah, blah, and it's really demeaning, but it's only during that 1 month. As Farouk said, in our events company, we do events. We don't do black events, we do events, but we're seen as a black events company. So brands want to talk to us when we try and get in front of a black audience. So there's a level of disrespect which does happen, and it's not just for black voices, it's any other voice, which just seems to be the global majority. So I think it's important to acknowledge the question, and if we are in those rooms, to actually start to shut down some of those voices.
may I also add to the race debate here that one other thing that I feel doesn't get talked often enough is class. I feel that the challenges that we've just described and explained are equally as true for the working classes. To be fair to myself, I'm going to talk about me, I'm privileged. I come from a middle class background. My parents worked hard enough to put me through private school, went to grammar school, I studied at university, I became a banker. I'm that guy. On paper, I come from privilege. I recognise that I'm able-bodied, I'm male. So there's a lot of things that are to my advantage as well. And I know the reasons why I'm here is because I had been given the opportunity to be educated, and I was successful at making a lot of money for other people that made me money. And that sometimes is also the reality of things. So I've sat in rooms with Mark where we laugh, where you've had a business star rise up, and they will ask someone, oh, how did you get that opportunity? How did you become you? And the person will sit there and say, I just got lucky. Really? So your dad's not the MD of such and such company, or your mum didn't go to school with this person that gave you the inroad. Because if you listen to the actual authentic stories, people are turning up at random man's houses, people are chasing different IPs with different, well, you're walking in by yourself essentially, and they've got a bank of lawyers facing you. That's the reality that you will face with regards to not being privileged in terms of class. So I think the challenge is equally as important or as challenging from working class backgrounds.
Yeah, absolutely agreed. I'm just going to crack through some of these questions because my phone is vibrating like a lunatic. But that's great. Thanks so much, guys. That's an amazing answer. Can we talk about crowdfunding and how to build a compelling kind of model when your communities are not necessarily cash rich? This feels like it's got your name written all over it.
Yes, hello, crowdfunding. So the lens of which I talk about crowdfunding is very specific to Kickstarter, but I think that is a good place to begin with. Obviously, there are many other platforms, many other places you can go to crowdfund, but the lessons you would take from one definitely apply to the others. And yeah, when it comes to building up a good crowdfunding or Kickstarter campaign, the number one for me, as I said kind of right at the start, is your audience. I would never advise anyone to go in completely unknown. So having a proof of concept and spending a considerable amount of time before you even launch the campaign, being out there, exactly, being in the room, talking about what you're working on, like sharing it. Maybe that is sort of hiring marketing in as early as possible or doing it yourself and kind of like getting the word out there, the sort of work in progress of what you're actually doing. So that, I mean, talking about marketing is a whole different topic of conversation. I won't get too much into that, but things like building up your social presence, building up your in-person presence, maybe doing talks, maybe building up your email marketing letter. So all that to get to the point that when you hit go on your crowdfunding, thousands of people know about it and people are excited about it. Then you get the sort of thing of like, okay, building up the trust. Like, are you someone who's worked on previous games before? Can you showcase what you've done? Can you prove you're the person to do it? Unlike sort of pitching directly to one investor who's probably more interested in, is this going to be financially successful? In a crowdfunding, you have a sort of more unique situation where you almost want to sell the dream a bit more. It's like, who is that individual? How are they going to engage with your experience or your game? And like, what are they going to get out of it? Who are they going to go with? Like, what fun are they going to have? Like, who are they going to be in that immersive experience? Selling that kind of dream and then selling yourself and your team as the people who will actually make it a reality. The other thing I was going to say is as well, just because I'm sure everyone else has important things to say on this, but the last thing I would say is I work in puzzles, and so when I do a lot of Kickstarters, they are almost always puzzle games. And my last point would be having a very compelling hook that specifically means someone should back you or crowdfund you before the event's been created, rather than just wait until general sale of tickets. At the one level, that could be early bird pricing, but at the other level, that's like an add-on, or like you're running like a separate ARG kind of going in the background of the Kickstarter, or some kind of hook that really builds the community around what you're doing and who you are. I've such a board game lens right now, but yeah, I like to do like a little hidden bonus chapter that like only if you solve the puzzles in the update you get to it, and so you sort of build up a buzz and people start to go like, oh, did you see that? There's like something weird in this update, and like having something that makes people back at $1 so that they can see the updates and do stuff like that. It can be really, really compelling to kind of get the campaign off the ground. I actually have hundreds more tips, but I'm dominating a little bit, so I'll let the other guys share theirs.
This is the lady to buy a coffee for afterwards if you want to mine her head.
Yes, you can find me if you want to talk about this after.
Yeah. I'm going to crack through a couple more questions, and then we can come back to that hand in the thing. Tom, this feels like this could be one for you. How can entrepreneurs best work with the press in getting their message out? Are there any recommended influencers or journalists for immersive shows? And is it worth getting input from journalists and previews?
I would just add on. I would just add on crowdfunding. Actually, I don't know if it's changed from 10 years ago, but you've got to treat it like a project. You've got to dedicate 6 months to it. You can't like anything else. You can't just walk into it and think people will come. The amount of people I've seen just throw up Kickstarters and then are surprised when no one turns up. But give it 6 months. Really build in a proper, and bootstrap it and get as many people on board as you can. Things like having incredible content is what gives the campaign legitimacy. And sneaky tip, try and scrabble as much money as you can together and put 25% in on day one.
Yeah, just to add to that, if you get on like Kickstarter on day one, then
real advice. Everyone does it, and Kickstarter will probably tell you to do it, although they won't put it in writing.
And then they'll market it for you because they'll put it everywhere. They'll put it in their newsletter and it's on the front page.
Yeah, and then you're suddenly in the best-selling on day one, and their algorithm will pick you up. So there you go.
And
but yeah, press. So this was something actually when we started that I knew nothing about, and we were really fortunate to get a great PR agency from day one through friends who we knew who were doing a burger business and were same sort of kids as us and didn't know what the fuck they were doing, and we all ended up with this PR agency, and it all just went really well. PR has changed and is changing, particularly with sort of social media now. It's a different sort of landscape. It used to be much more fun. You used to just go and get pissed with a journalist in Soho, and it was great. That doesn't really happen anymore. Picking up on what sort of Mark and Farouk said, they're not always your friend as well. Sometimes they will be looking for a particular angle. They will be trying to push their agenda or their story, and they might be sort of backing you into a corner. That's why I would recommend getting a PR agency and getting someone that can help you with the landscape. But having said that, if your concept is interesting and fun enough from day one, then there are still some fantastic journalists out there, and they will find you.
Amazing. I've got a few on here of a similar sort of theme of where do you go as a maker new to the sector to find that first investment, to find that sort of first bit of startup money, that first bit of seed money, to sort of get you started? Or is it, be it grants or be it sort of match funding or various other places like that? Do you have any sort of signposts to where a lot of people sort of find those initial sort of pockets of cash? Or is it's hard, isn't it, essentially?
It is hard. At my peak, I had 9 credit cards. They were all maxed out. I always made minimum payments.
This is not financial advice. Do not.
Andy told me to say that. I always paid the minimum payments, though, so my credit was still good, weirdly, which says a lot about the finance system. Quite often you've got to bootstrap it, and by bootstrapping we mean you've got to take the first hit. So if you haven't got generational wealth to rely on, i.e. mum, dad, auntie, uncle to give you X amount to kickstart you, then literally go to your friends, have no shame, and then just really, if you can't sell it to your friends, then you might be in a bit of trouble. If you got sent to your family, you might be in a bit of trouble. But again, if you haven't got the family wealth there, then look at your friendship circles. Turn up to, as Farouk said, events like this and sell your story. Again, as Farouk alluded to it, the very first one that Andy and his team did back in Waterloo in 2022, after the event, a young man came down from the stage with his laptop and came to myself and said, "This is what I'm trying to do." And we helped him fund 6 figures. That allowed him to start the development of his immersive events. And that came about by him just asking a question. Actually, no, it didn't just come back. He didn't just ask the question. There was quite a few conversations brought into what they were doing. And he had a compelling story to tell. He spent a lot of time that was, authentically vested in his proposition, his product. But that all came about by him turning up, getting a ticket, showing face. He didn't really know anyone else there. So yeah, turn up to spaces like this. Lean on your networks. So that whole 6 degrees of separation, you might not know that person who's got access to that person, who's got access to that person, but put the puzzle together. See what I've done there? Put the puzzle together, and you'll be able to access that individual. Like you've all heard from us now, we're all on stage. Tom's clearly the richest person here. He employs 300 people. I thought we were doing quite well with 8 people, but he's got 300 people underneath him. So nab him afterwards. Ask him about.
I totally agree with everything that Mark and Farouk said. And in the early days, it's just hustling. Like it's just hustling. It's if you can get a couple of your own grand together, if you can get a government scheme or a government loan or a credit card, don't advise it.
Don't do that.
Don't do that. If you can then get to 5 grand or 10 grand, then you can launch a crowdfunding campaign. Then that might get you 50 or that might get you 6 figures. Then, you don't have to go for broke with everything. You don't have to go and do the final 12-month run, take on a lease and take on staff. You could do a pop-up at that point. But and at each point, you'll find that you're going to have to take risks, and you're going to have to be in spaces that you're uncomfortable in, and you have to keep doing that. And actually, what Farouk said earlier really sort of made me think is that whether you're a solo freelance entrepreneur, or whether you're part of a company, or whether you're building your own company, those skills that you learn from day one of hustling, of just picking up the phone, of calling everyone, of calling in favors, of asking your mates, of doing a crowdfunding, they stay with you the entire time. And wherever you start out, by the end, whether you're CEO or MD or creative director, or if you're at that position, then 10 years down the road, your job is still the same. It's just the continuation of that. And I've seen that as a safety net to me throughout my entire stint in this industry. Is you're basically looking after relationships. You're basically looking after people. You're looking after those shareholders. You're looking after those people that have entrusted you with money. You're looking after IP owners that have entrusted you with their brands. You're looking after landlords, and you're looking after sort of your team members. But everything that you've done and learned in doing that from bootstrapping right from the start will stay with you.
I'll just give you a little insight into the Bridge Command story, because we were talking about that in the last session. So they had this idea. They found this open source software. They thought it'd be great. We can create a theatre show around this. They did a pop-up version with some leftover set flats in the basement of a carpet factory somewhere, and thought they'd run it for a week. But they sold out really quickly. So they thought we'd do 2 weeks, and that sold out really quickly. So they thought, okay, well, let's just run it and see what happens, And they were running it. On a shoestring, learning all the time about how it worked and tweaking it and, thing. And then one of the people who came to it was a guy who then invested, thought, this is amazing. I'm looking for a passion project, and put 3 million quid into building the 2 spaceships now down in Vauxhall. But if at the start of that journey they'd have said, we need 3 million quid, they would never have got there. It's the roadmap, it's the stepping stones, it's and there's a great book, we haven't talked about any books yet, but called The Lean Startup, which is primarily about software development, but essentially is, in a nutshell, boiled down to what is the cheapest way that I can test this idea. And I think we haven't really got into prototyping anything yet, but that's a real thing that for the immersive sector, I think is a real challenge in terms of how do you prototype something? How do you work out what's going to work? How do you make it good without spending any money? And then when the right people come along to get behind it, then you're gonna fly. But also you can prove to them that it works. I think that's also the big thing, isn't it? It's like if you're seeking investment, in my experience of talking to people about this, the first thing they look at is the team. Do we believe in the team? And the second thing is, do we believe in the idea? And if you've proven the idea, as in we've done it, you guys can come to it. We've sold tickets. We couldn't sell enough tickets. Then people will go, this is interesting, and let's have a chat.
Yeah, so just very quickly, I'm sitting here conscious that I've spoken about credit cards and don't want that to be my takeaway that I'm Mr. Debt. So for actual actionable things to do, also look at if you're solving a problem for someone or something like a brand or corporate. So there are schemes like Innovate UK, which funds innovation in the UK. They've got open grants all throughout the year. There's some collaborative grants with other countries which have smaller numbers of applications, which increases your chance of getting that grant. And it might help you start to reposition your proposition in your own mind. So in your mind, you just want to create potentially X, but actually by looking at some of their grant calls, you think in a different way that I can bring this to market in a way which is a bit more inventive. So I definitely recommend looking at, say, Innovate UK. I won't talk about the Arts Council too tough. I'm not a major fan. I'm not going to point fingers, but there are other grant options, potentially loans, angel investors, a lot of angel investor networks who just want to back good founders, female founder networks. So yeah.
Amazing. We're at time. I'm getting the thing. So thank you very much. Hope that's helpful. Find people, socialise with them. They might have some money.
Thanks, Andy.